Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. They say the darkest stories don't start in back alleys of big cities. They begin inside homes that look picture perfect. Smiles in family portraits, a manicured lawn, a father confidently facing the camera. But what lies behind that image? Barry Morphew liked to be in control of his business, his finances, and especially the people closest to him. His strength came from keeping everything under tight reins. His weakness was the fear of losing that control. To some, he was a devoted husband and a self-made man. To others, he was someone with a double life, able to mask his real emotions behind a polished facade. This story isn't just about a crime. It's about how thin the line can be between visible harmony and the quiet, crushing tension within a family. Suzanne Morphew grew up in a traditional American household. Faith, family, and community values were deeply rooted in her upbringing. From an early age, she was known for her warmth and empathy, always knowing how to connect with people. Her relatives described her as calm but resilient, traits that helped her face more than a few storms in life. When she started her own family, Suzanne threw herself into motherhood. Career ambitions took a back seat. Raising her daughters and keeping the home grounded became her top priority. In Salida, the small Colorado town where they lived, Suzanne was admired as a woman who put her family first, no matter what. Life tested her strength more than once. Twice, she was diagnosed with cancer. The treatments were long and grueling, but both times she pulled through. Those battles transformed how she saw the world. Each day became something to cherish, not waste. After that, she carried a quiet determination and found joy in life's simplest moments. Her recovery brought with it a newfound passion for mountain biking. For Suzanne, it wasn't just a sport. It became a form of healing, a way to reclaim her strength and sense of freedom. Those rides through the rugged Colorado trails weren't just exercise. They were proof she had come back stronger. To the outside world, Suzanne seemed nearly flawless, fit, full of life, deeply devoted to her daughters and her home. She embodied the ideal image of a small-town American mom. Neighbors saw her as a woman who had built a life the right way. But beneath that image was a story far more complex. Barry Morphew had built a solid reputation in Salida as a man who made it on his own. His landscaping business brought in steady income, supporting a large house and a comfortable life for his family. To the community, the Morphews appeared to be the real deal. A strong marriage, 2 daughters, financial stability, and active involvement in local events. But behind that picture-perfect image was another reality. Barry had complete control over the family's finances. Suzanne didn't have access to their accounts and was entirely dependent on her husband. Even small purchases were monitored by him, effectively stripping her of the ability to make decisions on her own. That control extended far beyond money. Barry sought to dictate every aspect of family life, from household routines to his wife's plans and daily choices. In public, he appeared calm and attentive. But behind closed doors, everything revolved around his authority. The reality at home was far from what neighbors believed. Where others saw reliability, there was, in truth, pressure and control. Suzanne felt less like a partner and more like someone living without freedom. Private messages between Suzanne and her close friend Sheila revealed the cracks behind the image of a perfect marriage. In her messages, Suzanne described how Barry changed depending on the setting, charming in public, but a source of tension and unpredictability at home. She compared him to Jekyll and Hyde, highlighting his erratic mood swings. She confided that, despite his declarations of love, Barry failed to understand the emotional damage his behavior caused. In conversations with her sister, Suzanne opened up even further. Shortly before her disappearance, she admitted that she no longer saw a future in the marriage and expressed fear over Barry's temper and controlling ways. It was clear she had made up her mind. She was ready to leave. Another thread of messages revealed a different side of Suzanne's emotional world. In 2018, she reconnected with a former high school classmate. At first, it was just friendly conversations, but over time, it evolved into a romantic relationship. They texted daily, made plans, and even talked about traveling together and possibly building a life side by side. For Suzanne, that relationship became a lifeline, something that gave her hope and reminded her what happiness could feel like. By spring 2020, Suzanne had made her decision. In one message to Barry, she wrote clearly, "It's over." It wasn't said in anger, it was a firm statement. To her, the marriage had ended. She was ready to move on. Sunday, May 10th, 2020, Mother's Day, started like any other. Suzanne's daughters, Macy and Mallory, were away on a trip. Barry, despite it being a weekend, left for work early that morning. He later said the last time he saw Suzanne was around 5 a.m. while she was still asleep. He mentioned that she typically went out for a mountain bike ride between 8 and 9 a.m., after he had already left. That morning, sometime after 7 a.m., Suzanne set out on her usual ride. It was a common routine for her during warmer months, a short ride before noon along familiar trails, with her phone always on her. These details would later become key in establishing a timeline of her disappearance. By midday, her daughters were unable to reach her, despite repeated attempts. The silence, especially on Mother's Day, felt deeply unsettling. One of the girls reached out to a neighbor and asked them to check on the house. The neighbor found the doors locked and no sign of anyone inside. Concerned, they contacted the police. Crucially, it wasn't Barry who called emergency services. It was the neighbor. When law enforcement got in touch with Barry, he claimed he had left for work early that morning and had no idea where Suzanne was. His later statement, that he had advised a neighbor to contact emergency services, raised eyebrows. In most missing person cases, especially involving a spouse, that kind of initiative typically comes directly from the partner. Barry stuck firmly to the story that Suzanne had gone out for her usual morning bike ride. Search efforts began immediately. At first, authorities considered the possibility of an accident, maybe a fall, a wrong turn, or a trail mishap. Crews focused on the routes she was known to ride. Before long, her bike was found discarded in the brush along the roadside. Its placement raised concerns. There were no signs of a crash, no skid marks, no sudden turns, no struggle to maintain balance. Just a bike, oddly placed. Separately, her helmet was found in a different location, even in the opposite direction from her presumed path. That detail was alarming. In most cycling accidents, a helmet stays close to the scene. Scattered gear in multiple locations is highly unusual and demands an explanation. These findings shifted the focus of the investigation quickly. Detectives narrowed the window of time, from early morning, when Suzanne was last seen at home, to the afternoon, when her daughters couldn't reach her. By the end of that day, police were already treating the case as a disappearance under suspicious circumstances. At this stage, the first cracks began to form in Barry's version of events. Investigators needed to verify his claims about his schedule and whereabouts, and to reconstruct Suzanne's last known actions based on available data. From the outset, Barry Morphew was the main source of information about Suzanne's final hours. He insisted nothing seemed off in her behavior the day before, and that Mother's Day was supposed to be a quiet, normal one. For his alibi, Barry said he had driven to a construction site in Broomfield, about 150 miles from their home. He claimed he was scheduled to work on a retaining wall project. That, he explained, was why he wasn't around when Suzanne went missing, and why he spent most of the day out of town. But that account didn't hold up under scrutiny. Data from his phone and truck revealed he was only at the Broomfield site for about 29 minutes. That was hard to reconcile with the scale of the job he claimed to be handling. On top of that, the tools he brought were just hand tools, nowhere near what would be required for a major construction task. These inconsistencies cast serious doubt on whether Barry's trip to Broomfield was even legitimate. Analysis of Barry's cell phone data revealed some deeply troubling patterns. During a critical time window, his phone showed unusual movement, shifting locations within the house in a way that investigators later described as erratic and inconsistent with normal usage. Then, the device either lost signal or was placed in airplane mode, timed closely with when Suzanne's trail went cold. When questioned, Barry offered a bizarre explanation. He claimed he was running around the house and yard trying to chase off squirrels that were, according to him, damaging his property. Investigators found this story hard to believe. To them, the phone's activity looked more like an attempt to hide his real movements, both inside and around the home. Barry's handling of trash that day also raised red flags. Surveillance footage showed him making deliberate stops at various dumpsters on the way to Broomfield, tossing bags along the route. When asked, he said he was just getting rid of wrappers and vehicle garbage. But detectives suspected something more calculated, an effort to destroy potential evidence by dispersing it across different locations to make it harder to track. Even early in the investigation, these inconsistencies began to form a troubling picture, one that shifted Barry's position from grieving husband to possible person of interest. A preliminary search of the Morphew home uncovered several concerning findings, none of which aligned with the idea of a simple biking accident. Investigators took note of Barry's physical condition. He had fresh scratches on his body. The placement and appearance of the marks suggested the possibility of physical contact with another person. His explanation that they came from routine activities was not convincing. The wounds looked more like signs of a short, intense struggle than everyday scrapes or job-related injuries. Attention then turned to the master bedroom. A crack was found on the doorframe, deep and clearly caused by a strong impact. It was confirmed that this damage wasn't present when the couple first moved in. Experts determined that such a break could have resulted from someone trying to force the door shut from the inside, or from a powerful hit against a closed door. Either way, it indicated forceful interaction, not something expected in a peaceful home. A separate clue was discovered in the laundry area. Inside the dryer drum, investigators found a plastic cap used to cover needles in dart tranquilizer systems. Its location was significant. The cap had gone through a full drying cycle, meaning it was likely in someone's pocket or loose in the laundry. Items like this aren't common in a domestic setting. Its presence raised serious questions and required further tracing. Each of these details on its own might be explained away as accidental or coincidental, but together they painted a far different picture, one of possible confrontation inside the home shortly before Suzanne stopped responding to calls and messages. At this point in the investigation, authorities began to develop a working theory that some kind of struggle may have occurred inside the house. From there, the focus shifted to reconstructing an exact timeline of what happened within those walls before Suzanne went silent, and cross-referencing every detail with phone logs, movements, and other time-stamped evidence. Barry Morphew's alibi, which hinged on a supposed work trip to Broomfield, began to unravel under scrutiny. A particularly disturbing detail emerged from his stay at a Holiday Inn. Staff reported a strong smell of chlorine in his room, along with towels heavily saturated with the substance. Barry had dispatched 2 of his employees, Morgan and Jeff, to the construction site, instructing them to continue work on a retaining wall. but when they arrived, there was no sign of the necessary materials or equipment. Investigators reviewing the timeline noted that the trip appeared more performative than practical. Barry made only a brief stop at the job site, spending the majority of his time at the hotel, where it seemed something unusual had taken place. When asked to explain the damp, chlorine-soaked towels and the chemical odor, Barry claimed he had used the pool. That explanation was quickly dismissed. The pool area was closed at the time, and access was restricted. Hotel staff confirmed it hadn't been opened or maintained for guest use. Moreover, the towels showed no signs of recreational use. They were scattered across the room floor, and the intensity of the chemical smell suggested they had been exposed to a concentrated cleaning agent rather than water from a pool. This hotel mystery became one of the pivotal moments that deepened suspicion around Barry's version of events. Later, a search of the Morphew home revealed a locked safe containing items highly unusual for standard hunting practices. Inside were a dart gun, a tranquilizer rifle, and an assortment of related gear: syringes, plastic caps, dart tips, and ammunition. This wasn't hunting equipment. It was a setup designed for remote delivery of substances, commonly used with tranquilizer systems. The presence of not one, but two separate dart firearms suggested experience and routine usage. Barry didn't deny his familiarity with this gear. In interviews, he told investigators he used tranquilizer darts and sedatives to calm down deer so he could saw off their antlers and sell them. This practice, while not commonly known to the public, falls into a legal gray area and requires precise knowledge of dosage and handling. Sedatives used in such a way are extremely potent, and their application must be carefully controlled, especially when administered at a distance. Barry's statements indicated a strong working knowledge of dart systems and the effects of these drugs. Special attention was given to one specific substance involved in the investigation: BAM, a powerful veterinary tranquilizer composed of 3 active agents. Known for its effectiveness in immobilizing large wildlife, BAM is typically used by professional wildlife agencies and zoological staff. It acts quickly in small doses and requires strict tracking for every single use. It's not available in regular pharmacies and is tightly regulated under federal and state protocols. Investigators requested official records of controlled substances across neighboring counties from 2017 to 2020. The results revealed that Barry Morphew was the only private individual with registered access to BAM. In contrast, public agencies such as Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service maintained rigorous inventory controls with no reports of missing doses. At the time of Suzanne's disappearance, Barry stood out as the only civilian legally in possession of that exact sedative, one designed for long-distance delivery using a dart. This combination of registered equipment and exclusive access to a restricted substance shifted the focus of the investigation toward a controlled immobilization scenario. In any theory not involving sedatives, such a setup would have seemed excessive or accidental. But in this case, it became significant on its own. It demonstrated intent, technical capability, and exclusive access to a key chemical. 1 year after Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, investigators took their first major step. In May 2021, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and attempting to influence a public official. At a press conference announcing the arrest, officials emphasized that despite not having a body, the volume of evidence pointed directly to Barry. According to the prosecution's theory, the motive was Suzanne's decision to end the marriage. They alleged that when she made her final decision to leave, Barry used the tranquilizer BAM, legally acquired under his name, to render her unable to resist. From there, prosecutors believed he used his familiarity with the terrain and technical knowledge to conceal her remains. But as the case progressed, systemic issues began to surface. The biggest challenge was the absence of Suzanne's body. Without it, investigators couldn't confirm a cause of death, leaving a critical gap in the prosecution's case. Additionally, problems arose around evidence preservation. Some samples were mishandled, and others had compromised chain of custody issues, weakening the integrity of the forensic trail and giving Barry's legal team strong footing for defense. Barry's attorneys argued that the case was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. They pointed out the absence of a body, no direct proof of sedative use, and gaps in the forensic timeline. Their position was clear. The prosecution had built a narrative on assumptions and investigative errors. In 2022, just days before the trial was set to begin, the entire case collapsed. Prosecutors dropped the charges, citing the need to strengthen the evidence. Because the dismissal was without prejudice, the charges could be refiled if new evidence emerged. Still, the move was widely viewed as a defeat. After a year of buildup, the trial never began. Barry walked out of court a free man, hand in hand with his daughters. Following the dismissal, Barry Morphew launched a full-scale media campaign. His legal team took a dual approach, pursuing legal remedies while shaping public opinion. They cast Barry as the target of overreach by law enforcement, framing the investigation as biased and dismissive of alternative explanations for Suzanne's disappearance. The cornerstone of their public strategy became the support of Barry's daughters, Macy and Mallory. Since their father's arrest, they had consistently stated their belief in his innocence. After Barry's release, the girls stood by him publicly and repeated that they did not believe he had anything to do with their mother's fate. To many observers, their unwavering support served as a powerful emotional signal. Daughters grieving the loss of a mother were unlikely, in the public's mind, to defend someone they believed was responsible. Barry and his daughters began making appearances on television programs and giving interviews to major news outlets. He spoke openly about how the accusations had impacted his life and fractured his family. Media coverage often included photos of Barry with Macy and Mallory, highlighting their bond and unity, an emotional argument in his favor. If he were guilty, his daughters wouldn't stand by him. Barry worked to present himself as a man wrongfully accused, and his daughters became a key emotional anchor for that narrative. Their unwavering support made his position more persuasive in the eyes of the public, while criticism of the investigation helped cast doubt on the original charges. This chapter in the case became a textbook example of how high-profile criminal proceedings can evolve into media battles, where public image is deployed as powerfully as courtroom strategy. In May 2023, a new incident caught public attention. A 55-year-old woman named Edna disappeared in a remote mountain area of Colorado. She had set out on a hike along popular trails but never returned home. Her phone went unanswered, and her car was still parked at the trailhead. For Chaffee County, the case was an eerie echo, another woman vanishing without a trace, in the same region where Suzanne Morphew had disappeared just a few years earlier. Search teams, including volunteers, K-9 units, and sheriff's deputies, scoured the trails and ravines. Drones and off-road vehicles were deployed, but the first few days yielded nothing. The area's rugged terrain made the operation difficult. Thick forests, winding streams, and deep gullies complicated every step. Edna's case immediately sparked comparisons to the Morphew investigation. News outlets and social media buzzed with speculation. Could there be an unidentified predator in the mountains, targeting middle-aged women? The theory of a third party quickly gained traction, even though law enforcement did not publicly support it. Barry Morphew's legal team saw an opportunity and seized it. They claimed the new disappearance proved that the original theory, a domestic conflict, had been flawed from the beginning. Publicly, the defense argued that if two women vanished in similar ways in the same area, then authorities needed to re-evaluate the possibility of an outside threat. Then, in September 2023, investigators made a breakthrough. Human remains were found in the Colorado wilderness. The shallow grave was located in a remote spot, far off the beaten path. The remains were confirmed to be Suzanne Morphew's through two forms of identification: dental records and a medical device implanted during her cancer treatment. Both matches were conclusive. The discovery set off a series of forensic analyses. The most critical was the toxicology report. Traces of BAM, a potent veterinary tranquilizer, were found in Suzanne's bones. The concentration indicated that the substance had been administered while she was still alive, and in a dosage that could not be survived. It was clear. Her death had not been accidental. Experts noted that the body had not decomposed in the location where it was found. The condition of her clothing, lack of animal activity, and soil composition pointed to a different reality. Suzanne's remains had been moved. She had likely been buried elsewhere for a long time before being relocated to the mountain site. Specialists from multiple disciplines were brought into the case. An entomologist studied insect activity and concluded that the life cycle of the bugs on Suzanne's remains didn't match what would be expected from a body buried long-term in the open wilderness. A botanist found microscopic plant particles on her clothing, species not native to the area where her body was ultimately found. An anthropologist confirmed there were no injuries indicating physical trauma as the cause of death, supporting the theory that a sedative had been used. These findings led to one chilling conclusion. Suzanne had been killed using a chemical agent, her body hidden elsewhere for a period of time and only later reburied in the mountains in what appeared to be a calculated attempt to dispose of remaining evidence. From that point on, the investigation entered a new phase. Law enforcement now had what they had lacked from the beginning: Suzanne's remains and a confirmed cause of death. In August 2024, the district attorney's office formally classified Suzanne Morphew's death as a homicide. The centerpiece of the case was the toxicology report. Prosecutors likened the breakthrough to a spotlight cutting through darkness. BAM, the powerful tranquilizer found in Suzanne's remains, was that spotlight, and it illuminated only one person: Barry. The defense's theory about an unknown assailant started to unravel. No one else had access to the substance. In court, prosecutors repeatedly emphasized that point. BAM was not a random contaminant. Its presence in Suzanne's system was the forensic link that tied her death to a person with motive, knowledge, and access to a restricted sedative. Faced with this, Barry Morphew's defense team pivoted to a different strategy. They focused on DNA evidence found inside Suzanne's vehicle. Forensic experts had recovered a partial male DNA profile from the glove compartment. When tested against national databases, the results stunned many. It matched genetic profiles connected to 3 separate unsolved cases of intentional assaults in other states. Barry's attorneys seized on this as a cornerstone of their defense. Their new theory: Suzanne may have fallen victim to a random attacker, and the DNA connection proved a dangerous individual, linked to other violent cases, had been near her. To reinforce this theory, they pushed hard for what they called a third-party investigation. They argued that law enforcement had unfairly narrowed its focus to Barry, ignoring critical evidence that pointed to someone else. The defense's approach relied on planting reasonable doubt, enough uncertainty to make a conviction difficult for any jury without clear, direct proof. But for the prosecution, the DNA argument wasn't a game-changer. Forensic experts explained that the genetic material found in Suzanne's vehicle didn't necessarily link any specific person to her disappearance or death. The traces could have ended up there by coincidence, possibly long before the events in question. More importantly, there was no evidence connecting the unknown DNA profile to the burial site or to the use of BAM. Throughout the investigation, Barry Morphew displayed behavior commonly observed in suspects facing serious charges, selective admissions, shifting timelines, and altering details once facts began to contradict his story. Investigators frequently noted Barry's evasive responses. He avoided giving precise timelines and often changed focus mid-narrative. For example, when asked about the night before Suzanne disappeared, his memories seemed inconsistent. One moment he couldn't recall what he had cooked for dinner. The next, he struggled to describe simple household routines. It didn't appear to be ordinary forgetfulness. It looked more like a deliberate attempt to blur the facts and avoid committing to any single version of events. During court appearances, Barry projected confidence, sometimes too much. His calm tone, forced smiles, and deliberate composure left a strong impression on observers. But psychologists pointed out that this behavior was more likely a control tactic, an effort to maintain the image of an innocent man, rather than genuine emotional steadiness. One key behavioral pattern stood out. Barry often blended truth with fabrication. He would admit to minor, inconsequential facts while denying critical ones. This gave the illusion of credibility. Listeners were more likely to accept his version of events without noticing that essential pieces of the puzzle were being distorted or left out entirely. The strategy allowed him to seem consistent, even though major elements were missing. Taken together, these patterns painted Barry as someone skilled at manipulation, using selective honesty to shape the narrative. Prosecutors believed this was not about flawed memory, but a calculated attempt to confuse the investigation and hide the truth. On June 20, 2025, Barry Morphew was arrested again. This time, the arrest took place in Arizona, where he had been living with his daughters. The warrant was issued by the state of Colorado and came with a public statement. The 5-year-old case was once again heading toward trial. Barry didn't resist the arrest and soon waived his right to fight extradition. Within days, he was transported back to Colorado, where a new legal process was launched. The court released a 7-page indictment outlining the circumstances surrounding Suzanne's disappearance and death. It included allegations of sedative use, efforts to create a false alibi, concealment of the body, and manipulation of key evidence. Barry's bond was set at $3 million, a figure that all but guaranteed he would remain in custody until trial. This new arrest marked a critical turning point. The prosecution now had not only circumstantial evidence, but also Suzanne's body and a confirmed cause of death. The second case was considerably stronger than the failed 2022 indictment. As of September 2025, the outcome remains undecided. The court must now review the evidence, hear from expert witnesses, and deliver a verdict that will close a 5-year chapter of uncertainty. Ahead lie long, difficult proceedings that will determine whether Suzanne receives justice, and whether her husband faces a sentence that will alter the course of the Morphew family's future forever. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.